Hello and welcome to Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. I'm Miss Jones from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded, and this is Big Bertha.
And I am Stacey Bell with Focused Fun in the US. And well, Rowan's laying down on the ground, so I don't have any fun visitors on my lap. Maybe Sadie will come by soon. Today, we're going to talk about all things multi-dog. So whether it's you have two dogs with separation anxiety, or you just have two dogs and one of them has separation anxiety, and maybe the other dog's behavior impacts how successful your separation anxiety dog is with training. And we'll also touch on if getting a second dog helps with relieving separation anxiety for your dog who has it. And anything else that we can think of related to multi-dogism. Yeah. So what do you want to get started with, Ness?
Well, I have three dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like having three dogs. I love my dogs, but I don't like having three dogs. Only because I can't give them all the attention that I would if I had less than three dogs.
Right. Yeah.
And it's only an accident that I've got three dogs, not intentional. It's just life happened. So, it's obviously, as you just said, one dog can trigger another dog. So if one of them's got separation anxiety, then it can certainly trigger the other, another dog. Hang on. It's very early in the morning and I'm very tired. Yes, what you just said. So let's pretend you've got one dog with separation anxiety. The other one barks at something external, and then that upsets the dog with the separation anxiety. And then, but it's always what happens next as well, isn't it? So is it just that they're barking, and this could be a single dog as well, is it just that they're barking at something outside, posties come or what have you, and then they can settle down, or does it tip them over the edge?
Right. And that's probably the most common scenario that I have seen with my clients with a second dog impacting the dog's training. Home alone training is that the second dog will hear something outside or see something outside and be triggered by it and start barking. And then the dog with separation anxiety will react. And sometimes they'll bark along and then resettle, like you say, and then sometimes they'll become anxious and unable to resettle again. So that can be really tricky. Yeah. And so for my clients, one of the things that I suggest, I think with this one is like so many other things, that you really want to work on management as your first step. So for me, I always ask, and it's not always possible, but sometimes it is. And so it's worth asking or looking into, is if the dogs can be separated. So can you put the dog that's triggering the dog with separation anxiety in another room, so the impact is either less, or maybe they're not being triggered by something in another room? That can work really well and totally avoid the problem in some cases.
Yeah, in some cases, because sometimes the dogs don't want to be separated, and then they cause more stress for either both the dogs or one of the dogs off. And can
it really can. And then in cases like that where they can't be separated, and this maybe would not be a case where noise or something they're seeing is triggering the non-separation anxiety dog, but maybe if there was like a energy differential, or one of them was like a puppy and one of them was like an older dog, and so maybe the puppy was getting in the older dog's space and the older dog was like, just stop. Like, I'm trying to focus. And so in cases like that, even if they can't be in separate rooms, sometimes you can separate them with like an exercise pen, or put the non-separation anxiety dog in a crate. Of course, that wouldn't help with dogs being triggered by noises, but it would help if they were being triggered by something they were seeing. You could put the crate in some place they couldn't see, like neighbors passing, cars going by, or if there was a big energy differential between the two dogs, and that's what was setting off the dog with separation anxiety.
Yeah, and also obviously, if it comes down to it, talking about management, not allowing either of the dogs access to the area that might trigger them. So if the trigger is out the front, maybe the dogs could stay at the back of the house or something like that.
Right. And that's a big one. And we've talked about this before in just our, kind of, I think, the barking episode when we were just talking about some management techniques there. So a lot of those same strategies would apply here as far as, putting them in a different area of the house, putting brown noise on to just reduce that level of the outside noise, and then working on it when you're home.
Yeah.
So you can definitely do those things. Now, Ness, have you had any clients with any other pets that impacted training?
Oh, I've had clients with cats.
Cats are so helpful. They're so helpful.
And yeah, actually one client, Buffy, shout out to Buffy, the vampire slayer. She's a little dasher. And the cat and Buffy they didn't hate each other, but they tolerated each other.
Yeah.
And the cat would go, sometimes in training, would go and sit by the front door, I guess, because mum went out that way. And and Buffy wouldn't go near the front door if the cat was there. So I'm like, we need to use this cat more often. But obviously I had another client with Benny the Beagle, and that dog the guy moved in with his girlfriend, and she had 2 cats, and the dog had never been around cats before. So if the cats moved, it was such a huge trigger for Benny. And they had to separate them. It complicated training anyway, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I've had cats. Yeah, I've actually had more cats impacting training than dogs impacting training. So it's kind of funny. I have one client where the cat would try to run out the door every time. So we had to work on some strategies to, because what would happen then is the cat would be coming towards the door, and she would run out the door and try to slam the door, which then the dog is like, what's happening? You just slammed the door, and then the cat's there. And then it's like, a super exciting thing instead of more of a chill departure. And so we had we worked on some cat toys and cat food puzzle kind of things. And, because if the cat was if she tried to close the cat in another room, the cat would yowl and get really upset. So we didn't want to do that either. So we, try to get creative with some toys and at least keeping her away from the door enough for her to depart and close the door behind her. But I've also had cats knock over cameras. Not quite as helpful.
I've had some interesting camera views thanks to cats as well.
Yes, they're so helpful, rubbing their face against the camera, and the camera goes down, or they just swat it off the table. I have had cats that hung out by the door a lot, not to escape, but I think just out of curiosity. And I've had cats and dogs who don't, quite get along. I mean, they're okay, but a little bit of tension there. So having to figure that out too. So that's another one. People feel like, maybe that cats are easier when it comes to that kind of stuff, but it can be pretty tricky with separation anxiety training. So that is something to kind of consider.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, only cats. I haven't had any. I've had people with birds, but they haven't impacted training.
I had shout out to Dr. Watson. He has a bird in his house, and the bird imitates barking and crying.
Oh, no.
So you would be looking at the dog, and the dog is sleeping. Dr. Watson is sleeping, but you hear noises that sound like a dog crying and barking.
Right.
Crazy. It messes with your head. You're so at first you think, oh, the camera and the
out of sync.
Sound are offset. and then all of a sudden you're like, no, that's the bird. That's the bird again. So that was an interesting one. I don't think it didn't really seem to impact the dog, but it messed with my head for sure.
Yeah.
So
I have had clients where the dog, and I would put this probably more in the FOMO category, fear of missing out, where there's two dogs, maybe one of them's reactive on walks and she wants to walk them separately because it's just too hard to walk them together. Takes out one dog to go for a walk and the other dog loses it. And I think that's quite a tricky one to train.
Yes.
Because
especially if you don't have two people in the house. If you have two people in the house, it's a little bit easier. Because then the person that's staying with the dog that's left behind can do some distraction and fun stuff with that dog. But
and often they'll say, I try to leave them with a Kong or something, and that doesn't work because the dog's too
amped up or
too amped up. Yes. So in that respect, I guess you can try counter conditioning, but lots of desensitization to that absence. Around the door.
I mean, just taking it slowly, right? Just doing the same training, whether it's frustration and you're trying to build that tolerance to frustration, or if it's anxiety based or a combination, you're still trying to start with what the dog can do and slowly build, even though it's a bit of a different situation. Have you had clients with two dogs that have separation anxiety?
No, have I? I don't think so.
I haven't either. I have worked with some clients in a group coaching kind of scenario that do, but never like a client of mine. And I don't know if it's not as common that people just, get that roll of the dice with two dogs that have separation anxiety. But I suppose that if somebody had a dog with separation anxiety and was already managing absences and they knew of another dog that had separation anxiety, they might choose to adopt that dog. So it does, it doesn't tweak the training as much as you think it would. I mean, you're going to always go with the dog that is finding being home alone harder. So the one that's on the shorter duration. So that may switch partway through training just because not all dogs, progress at the same rate. And some dogs might be having a bad day when the other one's not, or vice versa. And so we would just go with the dog that's on the lower duration at all times so that we're keeping both dogs below their threshold and making sure that they're both comfortable.
Yeah. Keep the dogs below the ability to cope. And if you don't know what a threshold is, make sure you go and check out our other episodes because we definitely talk about thresholds a lot.
We sure do.
Yes. But so if you've got two dogs, you work with the one that's least able to cope with the duration, whichever, and as you say, whichever one that is on that at that particular time can swap around. Yep.
So then another kind of big question that I think that we get asked fairly often, and I think is also one of those misconceptions, is does getting a second dog help?
I get asked that a lot. And it's funny because I know some people will say, yes, it helped my dog. But in general, probably not. The times that I might recommend to someone to foster, and I think the idea is to foster to adopt because A, your dog might not like the newcomer. B, if you don't want another dog, don't get another dog.
Exactly.
Just do the training, commit to the training. But the times where I might say, yes, maybe try to foster, would be maybe a senior dog that's passed and the other dog suddenly developed it. So it's not had separation anxiety all its life, but it's suddenly developed this anxiety. And therefore getting another dog might actually be appropriate provided they get along again. That's the caveat. which is
right.
I like foster to adopt, because those dogs
Yeah, me too.
But the other instance where I might say, yeah, it could definitely help would be racing greyhounds. So they're brought up in an environment where they've always got somebody with them. And then when they go into their pet dog homes when they retire, it's a whole new world. And
really is.
They're not used to, you know, they're brought up with other dogs constantly, or people, but probably more other dogs. So for me, it would be like an interesting test to, you know, I'd love someone to do a study, like get 100 ex-racing greyhounds, put them in a home and see if they do have separation anxiety. If you did get another dog for those dogs.
I wonder if that would help with like hunting dogs too, because like, I don't know if it's the same there, but here, a lot of the hunting dogs are kept outside in runs alongside other hunting dogs. And so I wonder if then one of those dogs got rehomed into a home and showed signs of separation related behavior. Same thing. There are about 6 studies that I could find. None of them were the experiment that you wanted to have done. But there are a bunch, and we can put them in the show notes for anybody who's super interested in it. But basically showing that there's not an association between the presence or absence of other pets in the home. And they looked at other pets, not just other dogs, and separation anxiety. So there's no correlation there.
Yeah. But they're not looking at dogs that have been brought up in that environment, are they?
Right. So one of the interesting things is like kind of special circumstances like you're talking about, you know, whether a dog recently lost another dog or pet in their home. And even if that is the trigger for separation anxiety, it doesn't necessarily mean that the new dog will alleviate those separation related behaviors. It could be, you know, their bond with that specific animal, or it could be just now that it's such a routine change that that's what triggered it. So like Ness said, you know, having a second dog or a third dog or whatever is such a big responsibility that unless you want the dog for yourself, like unless you really want a second dog, then I wouldn't get it. And if you do want a second dog, then fostering is a fabulous way to do it, because there are, you know, different personalities that may or may not mesh together. And that gives you the opportunity to see, you know, is this a good fit for our home?
Yeah, exactly. And so the scenarios is probably 3 scenarios that could happen if you've got a dog that has separation anxiety and you want to get another dog. You might end up with a cured dog. Your dog no longer has separation anxiety. You might end up with a dog that still has separation anxiety and the new one coming in doesn't. So you've still got the same issue. Or you could end up with 2 dogs with separation anxiety because they feed off each other. So you're rolling a dice, really, aren't you? So that's
you totally are. And it could be that the new dog coming in has no effect on the separation anxiety and is not affected by it. But there's always other issues that can come up in multi-dog households. And so you really have to be, you know, you have to be ready to accept that if that's the choice that you make. It could be that the whole barking scenario that we talked about, that the new dog coming in could be more triggered by environmental stuff, and that could make training more difficult with your dog. Or there could be resource guarding, or, you know, your new dog might be leash reactive, or you know, like there's so many other things. And so I think, you know, for me, I know that I've been like really wanting to get a second dog, but then like every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I don't know, because like, what if, you know, because Rowan is, not, I mean, he's got some anxiety issues, right? So like what I would love is like this happy-go-lucky dog, and, you know, that would run with me and like do all the things, go hiking and backpacking and all of that. But, you know, how realistic is that to expect like a dog coming in to just be able to fill all those roles? And so I'm like, So I haven't gotten a second dog. I will let you know if I do, though.
Maybe, yes. It's interesting, yeah. But hey, you're a dog trainer. I'm sure you'd be able to overcome all that stuff.
Yeah, but the work.
I know. Yeah. I did see somebody commenting about having two dogs where one has separation anxiety, but the other one has hyperattachment.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
That's
right. So what we're saying there is that the one dog has separation anxiety and the other dog is hyper attached to the dog with separation anxiety. So, those two dogs pretty much would have to be together unless the pet parent really wanted to work through that. Which, it's one of those types of things. You always have to ask yourself, how often will this be a problem? Obviously, if one of the dogs passes away, it's a problem.
Or has to go to the vet for an extended stay or something.
Right. So you're, in that case, usually you're training more for the exceptions than your everyday life. And then so that becomes a little more difficult to stay motivated on if you are a pet parent and the training is kind of intensive and takes a while to get through. So that would be a discussion to have. Your priorities, what, would situational medication help the dog that's hyper attached to the dog with separation anxiety, if the separation anxiety dog had to go to the vet, or, stuff like that. But yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So having multiple dogs can impact separation anxiety training in several different ways. So make sure that you're kind of reading the situation. How is it affecting your dogs, and how can you mitigate that with management and training? If you need help, make sure you reach out to one of us. We are here for you.
We are. Yep. So, it's goodbye from me, Ness Jones from Separation Anxiety Dogs and Training. No, so tired. Separation Anxiety. That's it. It's goodbye from me. Ness Jones from Separation Anxiety and Dogs Decoded.
And from me, Stacey Bell with Focus Fun. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye.